I picked the title, Securing Your Valuable Data, but then I had one thing in mind at the time, and it was going to require a lot of heavy lifting of equipment to bring it here. So I changed things. I kept the same title, but it's still valid. My name is John Edwards, and I just put in for reference, I am the president of Warpstock Corporation, so I'm going to start off with a quiz. I've got a series of pictures here. I want to see how much you can recognize. The first one,
hard drive.
Standard hard drive. This second one,
Looks like a SD card. Flash.
that's, what is it? No,
SSD card.
that's a solid state drive.
Right.
Small
right.
in size.
Yeah. Flash drive.
Of course, this one,
USB thumb drive.
thumb drive. Okay, I'll leave the two in the end and come back. I'm going to go down.
That's a SD card.
SSD card.
Standard memory card. It could be any of half a dozen standards.
That looks
One
like
at
a
the bottom.
laptop memory.
That's RAM.
Flash RAM.
This is the tricky one.
Looks like a
Like a RAID controller.
yeah.
Looks like a card.
Yeah.
It is. The interesting thing
It's an IE card, isn't it?
is this is also a solid state drive.
Yeah, it is.
This is the same. These two are
The same thing.
basically equivalent.
It's just that's
This
the
one,
color to the machine.
you plug it in as a standard hard drive. This one, you plug it into a slot. So if you want, you can get an extra hard drive storage out of it without having to go at it. Come over to this end.
External hard drive.
Yes.
This is your standard desktop external hard drive, USB type,
Oh, that guy.
and it uses a 3.5-inch hard drive. This one,
2.5 inch.
Laptop hard drive, USB.
laptop USB hard drive. One in this corner.
It looks like a NAS.
Some kind.
That is what is abbreviated as NAS, NAS, Network Attached Storage. That is what my big thrust was going to be. But this is one heavy sucker to move. So I didn't bother bringing it with me. Now, looking at hardware, and I want to look at different types, and some of this will be old hat to you, some will be new. Obviously, this memory or RAM is storage for data, but what's the problem with it? Well, the
It's
big problem
volatile.
is,
It's volatile.
yeah, it's volatile, and if you shut the computer off, you got nothing. But it's still storage media. Floppy drives. I don't know, there were some others that I'm missing here.
8 inch.
There was an 8-inch, and a 7-inch, 5 1/4, and a 3 1/2.
Yeah.
And these were true floppies. You bend them, which was real handy because bending them also destroyed them.
Yeah.
So you had single-sided, double-sided, high density, and then you had a number of specialties drives. There was an LP 120, ditto, a zip, and there were, I don't know, half a dozen others. Hard drives, they're not as standard as they look. I mean, the three main ones you see are IDE, ATA, or PATA, and SATA. And we're now starting to see the SSDs, which are the solid-state drives.
Don't forget SCSI.
Now, the interesting thing that I've found recently, SATA hard drive. I could get a 3 terabyte SATA hard drive for under $100.
Yep.
The solid-state drive, for, what was it I saw? There was one that I saw that would, actually it was probably the biggest one that I've seen, which was 320 gigs, but it was priced at over $1,000. So right now, solid-state drives are nice, they're fast, but they're pricey. And judging by the rest of computer equipment, the price will go down.
Oh, yeah.
Now, there's one I missed here, and it combines these last two, SATA and SDD. They call it a hybrid drive. And the first part of the storage is solid state, and the rest of the storage was SATA. And I'm trying to remember who the heck it was that put it out, but the nice thing about it would be...
When you say SATA, you really mean rotating storage, don't you?
Yeah.
What's that?
When you say SATA, you really mean rotating storage,
Yeah.
don't you?
No, SATA refers to the connection. It's a serial ATA.
But so are SSDs.
Yeah, SSDs are SATA or PATA.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
I don't think you can buy.
SATA or PATA, parallel.
Not now.
Yeah.
PATA is sort of the parallel version. SATA is serial, and there's at least 3 different variations of SATA drives. Usually SATA, SATA 1, SATA 2.
You're talking transfer mechanism, they're not storage.
Right, they're not the storage itself. These two groups are all disks, magnetic disks,
Rotating
systems.
That's what I said, rotating storage, yeah, you're mixing your metaphors.
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
May or may not confuse people.
but they're magnetic storage. This is electronic storage in
You have a SATA interface.
chips.
Yeah.
But the only advantage I saw of the hybrid drive was larger capacity, faster speed, because the key materials, like if you put on your operating system, you could put it on the SSD, solid state drive, so things would be quite fast. And then your data you could stick on the regular platter type drive.
So are those addressed as 2 separate physical drives?
Maybe.
No, it's all in one unit.
However,
It's-
I
I
know
know
it's all
you
one
mean
unit.
it's
logically-
logically. You can't address it logically as 2 different drives.
It's like a
You can't tell
partition.
where it goes.
That's right.
Right.
Actually, that's not
Yeah.
true, but that's okay.
Anyways,
You have to know its address. You may have, it doesn't have to be separate drive, but it's a different address. In other words, you could say first half.
Different
There's
CHs.
LDAs up to the gig, right? These SSD.
Or CHs. I mean, different
No,
CHs.
we don't do a CHS anymore. It's all-
the key thing I think with the hybrid drive that I'll mention was price-wise, it was a fair bit cheaper than just the solid state drive. But the interesting thing is, the one website I checked just before I left home to see what the price it was sitting at, no longer was showing the hybrid drive.
Yeah.
So it may have been pulled out.
Still a few
Is
bugs in
that
there.
hybrid drive with another
Not a
instance of a
business
caching
case,
structure?
really.
It is, in a
Okay, so
sense.
it's a two-level
you're right.
store.
It is
Get them.
It is true storage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the solid state part.
Yeah, I didn't buy
Yeah,
one.
I think it's better to call it hierarchical storage.
Yeah,
Which is
only,
something we've done forever.
it's something only to take
Exactly.
Because when you
reasons.
talk caching, really, the implication is that your data follows it.
Cache
In this case,
is there and gone.
Can be. You know, we got battery backup and all that.
Two-level storage is better.
But in general, the implication is caching is not persistent.
Moving
been
right
around for
along
30 years.
as to types, I'm not trying to get into the minutia of these things, I just want to look at them. Other types, we have optical drives and CD drives. You can get ones that are referred to as CD-ROMs, CDR, CDRW for rewritable. Capacity about 700 megabytes. DVD drives, there may be some that I've missed, but there's DVR, DV minus R, DV plus R, DVD RAM, and there may be several others. There's DVD-ROM, of course, which you can't, it's whatever's there is there and you can't change it. And now we're starting to see a few of the Blu-ray. Difference, this is 700 megabytes. This is about 4.7 gigabytes. And I can't remember the size on the Blu-ray DVDs. They are actually larger again, so because they use a compression system. And miscellaneous storage devices, tape drives. And I go back far enough with computers that I can remember having what was, for all intents and purposes, an audio tape recorder that you put a tape into, connected it to the computer, and that's how you loaded programs and data.
Press play.
And it was strictly serial, and it was slow compared to what we have today. The other tape drives that you run into are largely for backup purposes. Because any tape drive system is always serial. So if the information you want off of it happens to be the last piece of information on the tape, you've got to go through all of the other information to get to that data. It is definitely not random access. Whereas most of the hard drive, CD, DVD are random access. So you can jump to any spot. Now I didn't want to make an all-inclusive list here. So I stuck with just the more common types. There are obviously other systems around. Now, where do you find these storage devices? Well, some of them are internal, and they are all found within the computer case. Some of them are external, so they're attached to the outside of the computer case with some sort of cabling. And I threw in this category that I call removable media, because think about it for a minute. You have a DVD drive, but the data that you store is on a DVD, and you take the DVD out of the drive. So you can remove the media itself from the machine. And the drive could be an external drive too. You could have an external DVD drive, but you're still taking the media out. Recording media, as I say, separates from the device. Floppy drives, good example. You don't leave the floppy disk in, you take the disk out. Now, generally speaking, what we've seen here are three, if we sort of put it all together, there are three forms of storage. There's magnetic storage, which is disks and tapes. There's what's referred to as optical storage, which is your CDs and DVDs, and there's the electronic storage, which is the solid state. Now, the key here is magnetic media. Well, although we tend to think of it as permanent, it's not permanent. You can erase it.
Intentionally or otherwise.
If you have, I don't know whether any of you have had the experience of accidentally setting usually a floppy disk on something that is magnetic, and then you go to read the floppy disk, and there's nothing there, or it's scrambled or whatever. So magnetic media can be disrupted by magnetic fields. Optical media looks good. You know, somebody came out, where was it? They said, you know, I burned a CD and it's good for 1,000 years. However, the technology that's used is the laser hits a chemical layer inside the layers of the plastic and changes it, and that's where the storage is done. If you want to prove it, take a CD or DVD that has something on it you don't care about, but that you have it either elsewhere or you've read. Take that CD or DVD, turn it so that the side that's read is facing up, and put it in a sunny window and let it sit there for a day or two, and then try and read it. So you have to remember that most of these storage methods, although we tend to think of them as permanent storage, aren't. And other external hardware, flash memory, you've seen the little cards. If you have a digital camera, chances are you have a little memory card that you plug in the camera, and then you can plug it into an adapter, or some computers actually have a slot that you can plug into and transfer the data. Everyone's aware of thumb drives. Generally speaking, availability and size up to 64 gigs. Some of them, it's hit and miss, anything above 2 gigs, whether OS2 reads it or not. External hard drives, USB type. The largest one I've seen around is 3 terabytes. Trying to remember who put it out. Western Digital put out, what did they call it? My Book or something?
Yeah, it's got
Yeah.
3.
And it will store up to 3 terabytes. I think of it, there are external hard drives that instead of using USB, use FireWire. And I left it off here deliberately because FireWire hasn't been supported in OS2 or Ecom Station yet. I think there was an attempt at one time to support it, which was semi-successful, or maybe semi-unsuccessful. It leaned closer to the unsuccessful anyways.
Well, it's never got beyond the point of having some code they compile. I don't think
Right.
no one ever stuck hardware on it. The drive, the developers sort of disappeared.
You could read it but not write it.
It wasn't even that far.
It recognized the device, but you couldn't transfer data either way.
Yeah, I might have had the PCI in it.
Now, USB, remember there are a number of flavors of USB. We have USB 1, USB 1.1, USB 2. That's the highest level supported currently by Ecom Station. There is now appearing a number of devices that are USB 3, which are supposed to be better than 10 times faster transfer rate. The USB standards seem to start with one and work up, and each one gets faster. And USB 3, I would imagine, when more of it becomes available, that drivers might be written. The last part, and this was the last one I wanted to show on hardware, this is the one that as I say, I didn't want to lug the hardware here. Network attached storage. This is really hard drives external to your computer. Unlike a USB external hard drive, these units have a processor in them. And it may be a limited facility processor, but it is indeed, basically you could call it a computer, other than the fact that it doesn't have I/O, too much I/O capability. The other thing that's interesting, and this is a fairly new development, that, and I had to switch and get a new router, and this is why I know that this is available. Some of the new routers have a port in them where you can connect a USB hard drive and actually give it a drive letter that is accessible from the network, so it becomes a network attached storage device. Now, I can't tell you which ones. I haven't played, as I say, I got a new router and it has that, and I haven't played with it. But I've done a fair bit with this particular unit. This one is put out by Patriot Memory. It's called the Valkyrie, and it's one of the less expensive two-drive systems. And this is with it, the front flat closed. There is one little thing that you have to discover, and I'll give you the secret just in case somebody decides to try and get one of these. The drives fit in, this front panel is hinged down, but it fits in there. It looks so nice, and there's nothing obvious that says open here, which maybe is a good idea. Your drives, if you can see this on this one, are fit into a slide-in tray. And then when you push them all the way in, there's a locking bar, and if it locks properly, the contact is made. So these can actually be swapped. This unit has the ability to use RAID 0 or RAID 1. And there's a third one, and I can't remember what it is now. Basically, RAID 0 just says, if I have 2 hard drives in here, treat them as one. RAID 1 gives you redundancy. Whatever goes on drive 1 is on drive 2. So you have 2 copies of everything, and if you use RAID 1, you can pull, if one of the drives goes bad, you can pull that drive out while the unit is still running, put a new hard drive in, and as I say, there is a limited processing capability. It will actually match the data.
Yeah, I have one of these things, and I always wondered how you would know that happened.
Down on this side, there are 4 LEDs, 2 for each of the drives, and usually what it is, if one of the drives goes bad, it'll change, either the LED goes out, or you can only see the one that says there's something here, but you'll see no drive activity when you're transferring data.
So you have to kind of pay attention. This is a passive alert.
But, you know, the average life expectancy of a hard drive is quite a bit, and this is not a unit, as I say, that you're going to be moving around.
Right.
You notice though, because if you had it set and mirrored, then both of those hardware activity LEDs should be blinking at the same time, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So like mine's under my desk, I never look at it.
Oh, wow.
You know, I was wondering, does it beep or, you know, what?
I'm not sure whether there's, I haven't run into that problem yet, thank you.
Okay.
And I would like to thank the manufacturers.
Well, one of the things.
You do have a series of bars across here that are LEDs, and there's one for power, and there's a power button. There is one to show that it's connected to the your network, and the other two tell you there are 2 USB ports on here. And it is possible, and I haven't tried it, to put an external USB drive in and back your data up to that drive. So you could actually have a 3rd copy if you were using RAID. Now the only few catches of it, one is there's only two file systems you can use, either FAT32 or the EXT Linux one, and I'm using the EXT Linux 3. I had to update the firmware, and that gives me the RAID capability. And connecting this up to your network is done with your standard Ethernet cable. And I happen to run out of spots on my router, so I put a gigabit switch beside it. I plug this into the gigabit switch. I have one computer that I use strictly for editing videos, and you get masses of data with that process. And I connected it up to the gigabit switch, and I get file transfers that are something in excess of 2,000 KB per second. It goes very fast. If you're using the standard, 100 or 10x transfers, it's slow. I found it a very reliable unit. I only had one problem. When I got it, I put 2 1 terabyte drives in it. When I transferred all the video stuff that I had, I was up to something like 87% full. So I have changed it over. It now has 2 terabyte drives, which is the listed capacity. So I don't know what would happen if I put a 3 terabyte in it, but it made quite a difference in free space. Normally, this unit on my network runs 24/7. I have absolutely no trouble accessing data, transferring data in Windows XP, Windows 7, or Ubuntu. Basically, if you go in Windows, you go to the My Network Places, and it's listed there. If you go to Ubuntu and go to Network, it's listed. So it sees it. ECS, I've had some I can see it, but I've had some problems with file transfers. This has a built-in FTP server. So if I have Ecom Station files I want to transfer to it, they get transferred by FTP.
I have a question, John. Do you run NetDrive?
I have NetDrive. I have.
I use NetDrive on my NAS, and I just
Yeah.
I connected up NetDrive, and it runs like a champ.
I just haven't.
Files.
I don't know. I think it may be something in the way I set up NetDrive.
Because I think the NetDrive, because it really has pretty decent SMB support.
Right.
It talks very well to the Linux system that normally runs in an NAS controller.
So, anyways, this unit, I can't tell you U.S. prices. Canadian prices was about $165
Without the drives?
without the drives. Basically, because you have so many choices of drive that you have to take it without the drive, and then you pick the drive you want. As I say, I have had 1 terabytes in it, and I now have two 2-terabyte drives.
Are the drives SATA drives or IDE drives?
SATA.
Yeah, I have a D-Link thing like this, and I was able just to net use it, and it worked fine.
Right. It may be just the way I had it set up, and I haven't, let's put it this way, I had a number of other things to do, and I found I could transfer very effectively with FTP, so I said, okay, I'll go with FTP. There's quite a setup process in this, that there are all sorts of different features that you can enable or disable, as far as it can be used as a media server, for example, which I don't do, so therefore I haven't enabled that. There's a lot of different things you can set up with it. It's easy to set up through your browser. The first step, though, is pardon my foul language, Windows, and use the CD that came with it to give it an IP address. And once you've given it the IP address, then the rest is all done with the browser.
So it doesn't have a default IP address then.
What's that?
So it doesn't have a default IP address automatically then.
I think it has a default IP.
Mine did.
Because that's what I was
That was the
Yeah.
first thing I did, was I got into that sucker and gave it a 6-pack.
Now,
I could find it every time.
now the one thing is, you can set it up for DHCP. So in other words, it will actually go to the router and get an IP. However, I much prefer having a fixed IP on it, so that I always know where it is, and it makes it easier to access from other machines.
Pretty much all the ones I've seen because of DHCP.
Anyways, there's quite a list of them. Later on, I have a slide with a couple of references on it, and one of the references will take you to the web page for the Valkyrie, and there's a review. They have, a whole series of reviews that have been printed about it. There's one there that I found particularly useful. It was by a group called Test Jeeps. And it was very explanatory, and the other nice thing was they actually had reviewed a number of different network attached storage devices, and they listed them there, capabilities and price. And if you want to get into the higher price stuff, and you can get into stuff that's, several thousands of dollars, they tend to be faster. This is not the fastest device in the world. But then again, since you're using it mainly for storage and long-term storage, is what I use it for. Some people use it for backup. You don't need the ultra high speed. The last time I did a backup on a device like this or an external hard drive, basically what I do is just before I'm ready to go to bed at night, I set up the backup, start it, go to bed. If I'm lucky, it'll be done the next morning. But hopefully there weren't any errors that stopped it. So that basically deals with the network attached storage. Just very quickly, this one, I haven't played with it, called the Cloud. It seems to be all the current rage. Basically what it is the ISP will, for a fee, provide you with storage space on their machine. The major advantage that they seem to tout is it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you can access the internet, you can access your data. So that's, as I say, I have never tried playing with it. But if we're talking about security, if you're going to investigate this, that's one of the things you want to really check out. How secure is it? In other words, am I the only one that can see my data, or can somebody else get into it?
Most of those providers, you get an encrypted connection and your data gets encrypted at your end and then sent to their server.
Right. Now, it depends on who's providing it, but this seems to be advertised a lot lately. Second area of concern, software. Now, you want to deal with your data, moving it, etc. Your file system has certain commands that will work. Copy, xcopy, move are probably ones that we've been familiar with all the way back to DOS days. Now, other types of software, we can get archiving software, which basically creates a new file, in other words, a copy, but it puts it in a compressed format. That's usually the advantage of the archiving software. The other thing is it would allow you to take multiple files and store it in one file. So you could take a whole directory on your computer, archive it into one file, and then have that file available to you. Remember, though, that if you archive it and compress it, you have to uncompress it before you can use the data again. Backup software, I haven't listed a specific one for these items because there's a whole slew of them. Backup software, there's basically three types of backups that you can do. Full backups. The full backup is you take your all the data and store it. Differential means only store
The changes.
what has been changed since the last full backup. Incremental means that you store only what has been done since the last backup of either differential or full. Problem with incremental is if you've done it over a period of time and you have to restore it, you may have a whole slew of files that you have to restore because you have to take the last full one and restore it and then work through all the incrementals. Differential is two-step. You take the last full one and then you take a differential which gives you anything that has been changed since. The full one is probably the best. It's straightforward. Now, if we're talking security, there's encryption software. It usually uses a key to encrypt and a key to decrypt. In other words, somebody trying to read data on your machine is going to see gobbledygook.
John, you're about 5 minutes in the end.
The only problem here with this usually is, what key did you use? Because you have, quite often, you have to use the same key to decrypt, and if you forget the key you used to encrypt it, you may have just lost that data.
Okay, I backed it up.
But you backed up the encrypted file. The other thing that you have to remember is usually if you encrypt the file, let's use an actual example. Let's say you encrypted your income tax return because you didn't want anyone else to see it. Remember, it usually creates a new file. And you still have the original unencrypted file on your drive. And it needs to be removed. Now, removal does not mean delete. Deleting will remove it, but it may still be retrievable as long as nothing gets written over top of it. But there are software utilities you can get that a lot of them were written for governments, that what they do is they write all ones or all zeros in every spot that the file was, which means there's no way somebody's going to recover it. So the other possibility is password protection. Once again, the problem is remembering the password.
So I put it on a post-it note, man.
It's part of some of the archiving software. And believe it or not, I've actually seen it in some encryption software. That not only do you have to put in the encryption key, but you also have to put in a password before it'll decrypt the file. I'm not sure the status these days, but it used to be, based on surveys, that the most common password that was used was password. And
Default.
the other thing is, with passwords, there are devices that use passwords and come with a default password, and the password never gets changed. So, one of the first things I do with devices that are password protected is I change the password. This is deals with passwords, a little off, but an idea that I came across: if you want to create a password that you can remember, if you can remember a sentence. For example, my black dog is a Labrador named Rex.
I never remember that.
And then you take the first letter of each word, and whether it is a capital or a small letter, you use that to create a password. Now that's one example to help you remember, but you could also take the sentence and take the second letter of each word. Or take a sentence and take every fourth letter, or something to help you
Really screw people up for one they won't think of using? Put in none.
Yeah.
Right.
They won't think of using that one.
And I always swap zeros for O's, ones for L's or
Yeah.
I's.
The other one is put in an Alt 255, I think it is, It looks like a space, but it's not a space.
Some places won't allow that as a password.
Yeah.
That kind of character.
But depending on the password setup, they have, some of them allow any character you can type. Other software, both of these concepts I've dealt with largely using DFC. Cloning software. For example, on my notebook, I took and got an identical drive to the one that's in my notebook. And every so often, I use Jan's clone function, and I clone my drive on it. If anything happens to my drive, I have a spare at home that I can just swap drives. And the nice thing is, the computer thinks it's the original drive. And it even gets past the stupidity with Windows that tries to tell you that you're not authorized. And then, as I say, the cloning is nice because it creates an actual hard drive that's identical. That's why I use an identical drive. If I took, let's say I have a 500 gig drive, and I have another drive that's 750 gigs, and I clone the 500 gig, I am going to end up with a second 500 gig. So this, basically the 250 gig has disappeared and is not accessible because you clone. So you have to have a drive that's equal or larger. Image files, another one from DFC. It takes the entire drive, but it's also taking not only the contents, but it takes the partitioning and file systems and everything and stores it. All in one file. The only thing I can say is don't do this on large drives unless you have got a lot of time. It's slow. But it will let you, when you're through, you can take that image file and put it back on, restore it to your machine, and it will just look like the original drive or partition. Because you can do images on partitions as well. So it's similar because it's storing all of the information, not only the data, but the specifications. Final section. I call it wetware. Wetware is the stuff between your ears. In other words, you have to use your head when you're doing this. In other words, using your brain. Setups, if you're doing backups, set up a policy for yourself and follow it. For example, all right, you say, okay, I'm going to back up my data every week. So maybe you say on a calendar, every Monday I'm going to back up. So every Monday you do a backup. It depends on how much information comes in a week or whatever that you make a decision. A number of programs, OpenOffice is one, have autosave functions that basically will save your data every so many minutes. And if you look at the setup, the defaults in OpenOffice, it's set up for 15 minutes. Now, ask yourself, if you can do an autosave, ask yourself the question, how much time am I willing to spend retyping what I've already put in because I lost it? If you say 3 minutes, then change that 15 minutes to 3 minutes. And that will do the backup.
15 minutes.
So, or save the data. So you don't end up losing a lot of data. I think the worst I've seen with that was someone I know who's an author and was madly typing in a word processor that could have been set up for the autosave function and had been going at it for a full day and had put in something like 4 chapters of a novel and had a power outage. No, I'm just about done, so I'll go quickly. Make regular saving a practice if it isn't automatic. So in other words, if you say, I'm willing to retype 3 minutes, then every 3 minutes you save. Make use of hard copies. That uses a lot of paper, but at least you've got the data. Create secure passwords. As I said, don't use password. And make use of password protection. In other words, don't just shut it off because it's inconvenient. This can be an important one. Computer isolation. If you're really concerned about the data, you isolate that computer. It's not connected to anything. As a matter of fact, I have seen some computers set up that are so isolated they don't even have a floppy drive or a CD drive in it. You cannot directly input foreign data into that machine. You've got the keyboard. Now, usually those are in systems, and they have you have to go to your system administrator if you want a program put in, and the system administrator may say yes or no. Regular use of virus protection, not as necessary with ECS. If you're running Windows, yes. I mentioned this one before about secure removal of data. If it's really critical, find someplace off-site to store your backup, like a safety deposit box at a bank, and hope that the bank isn't flooded or something weird. And eliminate any unneeded copies. I've seen people that have had 4 and 5 copies of the same document on their machine. Why? You need one. Remember, you are the greatest security risk to your data, and you're the only one that can correct it. No one else is going to do it for you. And these are some general references. If you're looking for archive or backup or encryption software, probably one of the best sources for checking into it is go to Hobbs, and then Public, OS2, Utilities, and then there's a separate section for each of them, and you can wade through those lists. I suggest that you check the date, because some of them are old. DFC, that's where it's available. This is the information on the Valkyrie network attached storage. I'm sorry for the long URL, but that's what they gave me. This slideshow will be posted on the Warpstock website, so you don't have to write all of those addresses down, especially the last one. And basically, I was going to hope to deal with questions now, but if you, I think rather than do that, if you have questions, see the individual.